everyone, I hope you're all doing super well, and welcome to my oil painting and chill session of my painting of a cat entitled Afternoon Refreshment. It's actually just drying at the moment, so it's not next to me. Thank you so much again for your amazing comments on my last video. I thought I would do just a little chat about what inspired this painting first, and then I'll move on to the time lapse and I'll sort of talk about my materials and how I created the painting. And I actually had difficulty choosing what painting to put in this video because for once I have so many paintings that I've completed just recently, and so I wasn't entirely sure if I should post my most recent work or one that I'd created earlier. And so this is one that I've done earlier, but it's still a little bit wet because I use a very liquidy medium with this. It did take a little bit longer to dry. And so the concept behind this painting was this story of this little cat who is living in a house and is very faithful and good to its owner. However, one day, unfortunately, its owner passes away and it leaves the cat an incredible fortune. It decides to leave all its money and its house, everything, to its cat. And that was purely inspired by the fact that quite often I see or hear stories of not so much ordinary people, but perhaps these super famous people who decide to leave everything that they've ever had to their pets, which I find to be quite an interesting concept. And I wonder, how does the pet feel about it? And of course, because my art is sort of surreal, I thought I'd put myself in the position of the cat. And so in this case, the cat is kind of overwhelmed by all of its kind of newfound wealth, and it finds that from before it sort of was roaming the streets and would kind of even though it's a house cat, it was really a streetwise cat. But now that it's got all this luxury and everything that it could wish for, it has no need to go out and be amongst the other cats. But it finds that the other cats come to it, and it also finds that it doesn't really know who to trust, because with all this excess food and amazing things that it can afford and a wonderful house, it sort of starts to get a lot of cats hanging around it who are perhaps not that trustworthy, or could be using it just for its newfound wealth and wonderful lifestyle. So I also wanted to parallel this with how it could happen in real life. Now, not necessarily with me, because I am, as you can probably tell, not super wealthy, and I imagine that if I do ever become successful with my art, that it will be quite some time before that happens. And so I don't have any money to offer anyone, so I've never had that experience. But I think everybody in life has experienced over the years where they maybe have a friend or two who possibly are hanging out with them for perhaps not the reasons that they hope for. And that certainly happened to me, where in the past I've perhaps acquired a friend or two, perhaps in childhood or later on, where they have not really been with me for, not really been friends with me for, my sparkling personality, but they've been more interested in trying to acquire something from me, or think that I could get them somewhere, or I know people that might get them somewhere, or something like that. They have some ulterior motive, and really these people, as I suppose the term is, sort of users, or people who aren't really interested in you as a person, but they just sort of want to get things from you. And so I also wanted to put that into some kind of art, because I do find that whole idea of circumstances suddenly changing and then acquiring new people in your life and sort of thinking, well, who can I trust? And this element of suspicion around things. And this painting actually took a really long time. Like in my time lapses, I don't really show the painting process right from the beginning. It's very difficult for me to film because of my setup, and I also have to film under very big lights, and it's actually quite hard to paint when the lights are really hot and you've got your arm at a really weird angle, and I like to think of ideas as I'm painting, and it's a lot more difficult if there's a camera right in front of my work, so I can't actually sit back and think about what I'm going to paint next. I have to do everything in very rapid succession, and so I film various clips of my painting process. It's not just one continuous evolution of the painting. It's sort of various snippets, if you like. So that is the reason why sometimes it's a misrepresentation of how long it takes me to paint, but I just think it's important at the same time to show you some sort of process rather than me just talking about the painting and then just showing the finished painting, because I feel like also, and in this case I failed quite dramatically because I haven't even got the finished painting behind me, so as you can see it's like not a very well organised setup. But at the end obviously I will discuss my materials and things, and so I just wanted to give you a brief insight into this painting. And I certainly had a great time working on it, and the canvas that I used was actually a cotton canvas which has a little bit of texture on it, and I do actually quite like that type of surface, but I've been switching around a lot with the surfaces that I've been working on and a few of my materials like the mediums and things. So once again it's been a little bit interesting to adjust, but I do like to experiment now. I did stick for a long time with the same things and with the same materials, and I wanted to just make sure I became the master of that particular of those particular type of materials. But at the same time I realized that I need to experiment more, and I don't think I'll ever reach a point where I've got the perfect set up for my work. I think I will always be trying out new either mediums or perhaps a new style of painting or a new canvas type. So that's just what I've come to terms with, I guess. And I hope you guys have all been super well, and I've got some really interesting paintings coming up. I've been putting glimpses of them on my social media, so if you would like to follow me there, that would be great, because then you can see what I've been doing and I will follow back and see what you've been doing art-wise. I actually got quite a rude comment on this painting, which is really funny because I wasn't expecting any kind of reaction, but someone wrote, I'm not sure where on my social media, it was probably either Instagram or Deviantart, someone wrote cats don't eat citrus fruit or something. I don't think this person realised that my art is anthropomorphic, which means, you know, animals as people or animal with human characteristics, and they actually took it as a realistic portrayal, which I honestly find to be quite strange, because whenever I see a piece of art or a painting, I certainly don't naturally assume that it was all taken from a photograph or taken in a photorealistic way. I just look into the artist and see what type of thing they create, and this isn't a photorealistic painting, quite evidently, but at the same time this individual obviously takes art as reality, which is very intriguing to me. So I'm not saying they were at fault, perhaps they just have a different way of seeing the world, and so I thought that was quite funny at the time. But at the same time, you know, it's great to get a reaction. I was a little bit taken aback by, I am always taken aback by, you know, the odd comments I get on occasion, and I did think to myself, it is very important to get a reaction. And so even if you get sometimes negative comments on your art, it doesn't necessarily matter as much as long as you're getting some input, because I think silence is the worst. It's the worst to post something and have absolutely no interest and no commentary, nothing. I would say that's the worst experience, and I found that a lot when I started out posting on social media. I didn't get any reaction at all. So I think it's probably better to get a negative reaction, even if it is that bad. Or it's something really weird. It wasn't even that bad, it was just bizarre. But even if it's something bizarre or even if something rude, it's better than getting nothing at all. And of course in art it is great to you know, there isn't an artist, I don't think, particularly if we were talking about, you know, a super legendary artist, that doesn't have you know, people who love and hate their work. And so of course one would love it if everyone adored my art, but there are some people obviously out there who don't get certain things, they don't like certain pieces of art, and art is so subjective that way, which, you know, opens up a great conversation. So it's fantastic that people can react in whatever way they choose. So it's definitely a great and positive thing if you are getting you know, different reactions, even if at times it can make you be like, what? But then then you could just be like, actually it's okay, this person obviously is you know, doesn't agree with the way I think, and that is perfectly fine. So I hope you enjoyed. Hello everyone, I'm just starting the time lapse now, and as you can see I'm painting the eyes with this sort of translucent paint, and this was just created by using a lot more medium. And whenever I see translucent areas in a painting, it could be like the fruit, the eyes, some sort of surface that isn't completely opaque, I will thin it out with a lot of medium, but then each subsequent layer I will add just a tiny bit more paint, but I do keep it still pretty translucent so that you don't lose that kind of a magical glow. And then with the rest of the painting, so with the fur and the nose and the mouth and things of the cat, I was adding a lot more paint and a lot less medium, because obviously these are opaque areas and you can be as thick with the paint as you like, particularly with fur, because you can create that sort of really nice texture. So I did keep it a little bit fluid in the earlier layer, as you can see, but I was building up the concentration of colour quite quickly with those with sort of fur areas, a sort of soft fur, because I wanted to get a little bit of shadow behind them, but really create this nice texture so it looked like you could sort of touch it and feel it, and it felt really nice and soft. And so I'm jumping ahead now because there was a lot of work in between this, and I'm just creating the sort of shadowy areas. So obviously the layer underneath has completely dried, and the medium that I was using was very liquid, as I stated before, so I had to wait a couple of days for it to dry, so it wasn't just overnight, unfortunately. And I wanted to create some sort of shadowy areas here so that you can see the light sort of cast bouncing on top of the cat, and just emphasizing the mouth area with a little brush and trying to show the sort of outline of the cat, but not being too defined, because I think with sort of white cats, they are literally completely white. Like they don't have any kind of extra color anywhere. I see white cats quite often and they always really stand out. What's amazing about white cats is when they're in nature, their sort of figure looks sort of really amazing against the dark background of the trees and the kind of foliage and things outside. So I always think that looks really amazing. So this has a slightly greyish tinge because obviously I'm working in some shadows, but I wanted to keep it very subtle, and I thought that this cotton canvas worked amazingly well with subtlety, and so I was able to create this really kind of soft shadowy effect. It's certainly not a canvas that I can use all the time, because when I want to do some super fine detail, I found that it was okay with that, but it didn't handle it quite as well as a much smoother surface. So if you're looking for super fine detail, you would want to switch to like a much smoother canvas texture. But it was great for this particular type of piece, and I do hope you like it. Here I'm just going to zoom in and show you some of the little details, and it was great fun to create sort of shiny fruit and making sure that the light was reflecting on the fruit just right, so it looked, sort of juicy and good enough to eat. So I do hope you enjoyed this little time lapse, and I will see you next week for another little painting. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, of course, and have a wonderful week, and I will see you next weekend.